Hey everyone! In this video, I'll try out this electric paint from the folks over at Bare Conductive. So if you've never heard of this stuff, the idea behind it is really simple. It's paint that conducts electricity even after it dries. This means that you can basically paint your own wires to create electronic circuits on almost any surface. And while it has uses like creating test circuits without soldering or repairing broken connections, I think the most interesting application for it is in user interaction, because you can paint buttons and touchpads onto practically anything you want. Here, I'm making a test trace by painting a straight line onto a piece of paper. You can also paint using stencils if you need more precision, and the thickness does impact the electrical properties. For instance, a really thin layer will have more resistance than a really thick layer. Now, if you're clumsy like me, you'll probably get this paint everywhere, even just from painting a couple of lines like that. Luckily, this stuff washes off really easily with warm water. It also came off of the brush really easily too. For my tests, I've decided to create some basic probes by stripping these wires and soldering them to a couple of paper clips. This will make it easier to hold the probes in place and attach them to a development board to experiment with different circuits and code. Speaking of development boards, Bare Conductive makes their own board called the Touch Board, which is Arduino compatible and has 12 capacitive touch pins, 6 analog input pins, audio output, and a bunch of other features. They also sell a Raspberry Pi hat that offers 12 capacitive touch pins, audio output, and a red, green, blue LED. I don't have either of those to test out right now, but based on the specs, I'd say that if your plan is to do a bunch of capacitive touch interfacing, especially if you need audio support, either one of those options will probably make your project a lot simpler. To test the resistive properties, I'll be using this Propeller activity board, which has 4 analog input pins, plus a little breadboard, which is really convenient for testing things like this. And here's where those paper clips are useful. I can attach the analog input clip to one end of the trace, and then use the other clip attached to 5 volts DC as a probe. The code I have loaded onto the activity board will blink this light at varying rates depending on the analog input. So the closer I bring the two paper clips together, the less paint the electricity has to flow through. That means that there's less overall resistance, so the analog input is greater, thus the light blinks faster. By attaching the other paper clip, I can effectively create a potentiometer. This way I can control the voltage just by sliding one of the paper clips up and down. This has all kinds of practical applications, like maybe a volume knob, or even a musical instrument where you change the frequency by sliding the paper clip around. To test the capacitive properties, I'll be using this ESP32 development board. I have it programmed so that when one of the touch pins is activated, it turns on this blue LED. And you can see it works just fine on the probe itself, but what about the electric paint? Yep, it works just as well through the paint because of how conductive it is. Using this setup, you can't really tell where on the trace was touched, like you can with analog input, because it isn't measuring the resistance between two probes, it's measuring a change in capacitance. But this has a really neat property in that you can trigger something just by touching a surface. So here, I've run a wire to the corner of my monitor and taped around an area to make it easier to paint. Next, I painted over the surface along with the exposed bit of wire. Now I have a touch button in the corner of my screen. And since the microcontroller can communicate with my computer either by Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or in this case a serial interface over USB, I can use a tiny script to listen for touch events and do different things. Here, as a test, I'm creating a desktop notification when it's touched. But you could do anything with that script. For instance, pause and play the music you're listening to, switch between Linux workspaces, toggle day and night mode, anything you want really. In this example, I've set it up to open my YouTube channel, and that's just a few lines of Python code. Well, I'll definitely be using this stuff in my future projects because it's a great way to add interactivity to things. Go to the comments below and let me know what kinds of projects you would make with this paint. But until next time, bye!